a paradise lost. But why did it even have to happen? Well, you know the saying, you can get too much of a good thing. Well, let me take you back thousands of years ago, but not many, many, many thousands of years ago. Now let's go to a specific point in time when the social classes were birthed. So you have the poor or the impoverished, you have the middle class, and you have the wealthy class. Now with the poor, they were easily or more easier to subjugate because of their particular dilemmas involving them not having too much money to get by with. So that was a new form of slavery, because if someone is poor, then they become dependent upon a master to provide for them jobs, services, and whatever else they would require of basic and non-basic necessities for living. You have the middle class, which were people earning a pretty good wage, or they might have inherited enough money to buy, say, homes, have their little farms where they can grow livestock and provide jobs for the impoverished or poor, but only to a certain extent. And then you have the wealthy who were major landowners. They owned heads of cattle, livestock, and many thousands of acres of land. And these people in particular were like the masters, in which provided substantial amounts of services for persons of the middle class and the poor, meaning they provided the jobs, they provided loans, they provided the means for people to move in to communities because they owned all of that. And so the social classes would be a particular way in which many would live for many generations, being that of thousands of years and hundreds of years. But that was an indication that there would always be people that didn't have much money or much of anything. That would be an indication that there would be those that would have a nice amount of whatever they needed, being that of a sort of substantial, but not yet something of an enormous amount. And there would be the wealthy who would have more than enough to live on, and sometimes much more than they needed. So, and that was another indication that things were not free as they once was, because we had a commerce society which involved buying, selling, spending, and purchasing. So it wasn't like back in the day, thousands of years ago, where you can just walk up to a piece of land and lay claim to it and say that, hey, this is my home or my property, I'm going to build on this. And you just couldn't at this particular time, later on, you just couldn't walk in somebody's yard and grab a piece of fruit off the tree and just start eating it because it didn't belong to you. Because somebody else had laid claim to that particular fruit. And that's the difference between when their things were prosperous, plentiful, and free, and open for anyone to take. Because things were much more accommodating that way many, many thousands of years ago. And since there were so fewer of a population, then those of the fewer could lay claim to much more. But as the population grew, then there were only select types that could lay claim to so many and so much. And that would be of the rich class. The rich would own the majority of things regarding property, possessions, and land. The middle class would own a nice, tidy sum, which would enable them to say, hey, we are successful in life. And we are most definitely not poor and impoverished. And then there were the poor who would have to claw and scrape just to get by. And like I emphasized before, poverty is a form of slavery because you become overly dependent on a master provider. And in some cases, that would be a government system who would become the master over the poor because they would be responsible for providing such services for basic and non-basic for living purposes. But like I said, much later on through the generations, it will become much more known that a paradise had been lost. Thanks for tuning in.